Hello, hello, and welcome to the official tutorial for the Bat Company bag. This is my latest creation, and it is my first messenger bag style bag. And as you can see, it's pretty typical of most messenger bags. It's rectangular. This is the one that you will see made in the video. It has a lot of potential for a lot of modifications, but it's usable just the way it is. So you open the first flap, and you can see there's the main compartment with a large zipper pocket. And then when you open the second flap, you've got a large slip pocket. I wanted to keep the overall design pretty basic so that it can be beginner friendly. This is also domestic friendly, and you can make pretty much any modification that you could think of. You could add a zipper or a slip pocket to the back. You could add side pockets. You could add some additional pockets. This is large enough for you to add like a zipper pocket, same on the other flap. You could add a little slip pocket on this side, maybe one of those really cool double zipper slash slip pockets. You could add pen holders or anything you want in there. You could even probably fit a zipper or another slip pocket in front. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Just like all of my patterns, there's plenty of room for modification. And it's just got one snap closure for each flap and a crossbody strap that is attached with grommets. Hopefully you'll be able to follow through with the tutorial okay. I'm no pro at this, so you get what you get. And remember to join the Hollow Bag Creations, the Patterns group on Facebook, so you can share your makes or ask questions if you have any. So let's go ahead and hop into that tutorial. First part is the stabilizer and the foam. Now the only piece that's going to have stabilizer that's really necessary is the gusset. And it's going to be, I use Decoville Light. You're welcome to use whatever you have on hand that is similar. For those of you who are beginners, SF101 is a very common interfacing for people to use. It is an interfacing, not a stabilizer. If you put 2 or 3 layers of it on here, you're still not going to have the same effect. So you should definitely invest in some stabilizer. And the foam that I'm using is also by Pellon. It's the Flex Foam. Now I have found sometimes I will use Thermalone Plus when I want something like a really thin, spongy feel. And I know it's not exactly foam, but it's usable in its place. However, I wanted more of a spongy feel on this bag, so I'm using the Pellon Flex Foam. Now this is the sew-in stuff, and I have found that when using a spray adhesive on the Flex Foam, that the Flex Foam will stretch more. So if you find that once you start to get the Flex Foam onto your gusset that it stretches past the stabilizer, you can trim it down. I think I may have trimmed slightly too much, but that's okay. It's not really gonna be a pain at all. And if you're curious, this is the spray adhesive that I use. It's just Elmer's Craft Bond. It's the regular strength. I used to use the extra strength for everything, and you can tell it's got like a teal, some teal stuff on here, whatever the craft projects are on that can. And I can't find it anywhere. I haven't been able to find it in over a year. So I'm just using the regular strength Elmer's Craft Bond. And fair warning, if you do use it, that stuff is extra sticky and it will stick to your skin. And it is extremely hard to clean off, so be careful. So once your gusset's done, the next two pieces are the front and back exterior. Now, you can put a stabilizer piece on if you want to make it more, a little bit more solid if you're using thinner or more flimsy fabrics. I am using a relatively thick crosshatch vinyl, so it stands up on its own quite well. It's very structured, so I'm just going to be using foam on this bag. And the foam and the stabilizer pieces for all three of these are cut out from the exact same piece. So the one that says stabilizer is also the foam. It should say on both of them. I'm pretty sure I fixed that. Before it used to just say foam. So once you've got those put on, you can set them aside. Oh, I do also want to mention, if you are doing a sew-in foam and you don't want to use any kind of an adhesive, then I would recommend cutting out the foam piece with the actual exterior piece pattern instead, pattern piece, instead of using the foam pattern piece. And then if you have a zigzag stitch on your machine, use a zigzag stitch all along the exterior edge. I cannot freaking words right now. Oh my God. I'm like so underslept right now. Use a zigzag stitch or something similar around the outside to not only attach the foam to your exterior, but also to squeeze it down so that it minimizes the bulk in your seam allowance. So we'll go ahead and set those aside. And then, if my fingers will work over here, we are going to go ahead and move on to the strap. And I just grabbed the wrong pieces because I'm totally following along with the instructions. Let me set those aside. So we're going to go with the strap. Obviously, you can choose any size you want. I always do a 1-inch strap, and I also do two 2-inch pieces to combine one strap. A lot of people prefer to use a 4-inch wide piece and then fold it in half and then fold it in half again to get that 1-inch strap, but my OCD does not allow that to happen. So I physically and mentally cannot do the 4-inch wide pieces. I have got to do the two 1-inch pieces or two 2-inch pieces, because then I'll have symmetry on my strap. I know, I'm weird. So if I can find my ruler, I'm totally organized here. I'm gonna go ahead and mark a line down the center of each of these pieces. Next, I'm going to run some double-sided tape right over that line. This is the 1/2-inch Hyper Stick from Wawak. Okay, and then go ahead and fold the long edges in towards the center line. Next, I'm going to put another strip of tape on here. And you were warned in the instructions that I use a lot of tape, so if your machine cannot handle using double-sided tape or you don't like using it, you don't have to. You are free to use clips. I just prefer to use double-sided tape because then I can avoid any shifting whatsoever. Also, my machine can handle it just fine. Alright, peel back the paper, and then I will tilt my strap on its side, or half of it rather, and oh, let me fix this real quick. Alright, so tilt half of it on its side and then press the other half up against it, and then I just hold them in place while pinching to get them fit nice and tightly together. Go ahead and smooth it down. You can check to see if you've got anything that's misaligned. And then turn on your machine and top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, once you've trimmed off the loose threads, if you want to even up your ends, now's the time to do it. So now that those are top stitched, we're going to go ahead and make our marks for the rivet holes. I think you should be able to see the numbers on this ruler are big enough. So what I do is I just line up both ends with the bottom of the ruler. And then I take my silver ink marking pen. And these are the ones that you can get from mormino.com. I don't know if she has any in stock right now, but you never know. So we're going to mark a spot at 5/8. I can't even see where I am. Here I am. So we're going to go 5/8. Then we're going to go 1 1/4. Then 2, hold still, 2 3/4. And 3 3/8. All right, and then go ahead and punch your holes however you need to. I like to double check the alignment once I'm about to press the hole to make sure that it's centered on the strap instead of the mark that I made, because the mark is more of a suggestion than the actual placement. So as you can see, I didn't exactly cut my holes directly on the marks. Next, You're going to grab your slider and figure out where the top is. This is the top. So I'm going to slip the top side of my strap. Let's see how well I can show this. The top side of my strap into the top hole of the adjuster. Pull it through a bit and then tuck it down and go back through the bottom of the slider. Now, while I've got it like that, I'm going to go ahead and attach my, let me grab the rest of this stuff here. Alright, so I'm going to attach my end cap. First I'm going to clean up the threads just a little bit. Just melt them down so that they're out of the way and they don't pop out from any of the edges of the slider. Do this side too. I need a new lighter. Alright. Now, one of the things I do is I will also crimp down the end, just the very edge of the strap, just to make sure that it'll fit inside of the end cap. A little tip, when you separate your hardware out like I do, insert the screws to wherever they go so you don't lose them, and you can be sure that you have one that actually works in each screw hole. I don't know how many times I've either lost a screw or ended up with a stripped screw that didn't fit into something. So check your hardware ahead of time to save you time while you're sewing. Alright, then I'll go ahead and slide that on. Center it as best I can. And attach the screws. Okay, my video cut off, but I installed my end cap. Now, I should have had these pulled out already, but I completely forgot. You're gonna need your rivets. Okay, so move the slider so that the center bar is lined up in the center of all four of your holes. And then you're gonna fold the strap in on itself and pop a rivet through each of those holes. You want to make sure that your rivet comes out on the other end. It doesn't have to come out a lot, but you at least want maybe 1/32 of an inch to pop out. You want it to pop out basically enough so that you can kind of tilt it sideways from your eyes and still see them. You can see the tops sticking through. Either just at the surface or just past. And then pop on the cap And either it's going to make a sound like a little snap, or it's not going to make a sound, but you will be able to feel it sliding into place. See, those are solid. They're not going anywhere. And if you need to learn more information on rivets, I was going to do a video, but I'm not going to anymore because Nicole Niels of Sonar actually just did a really good video all about rivets. So you can head on over to the Sonar channel and watch that. I can't even see what I'm doing here. Alright, so go ahead and set your rivet if you can see what you're doing. Make sure to keep the slider completely out of the way, because you could either jack up your pressing tool, or even worse, you could damage your hardware. So I'm going to go carefully through here. Actually, let me slide it a little further over. There. So that side is done. Next, the easiest way to do this is to aim it so that your strap end is facing up. Grab onto the strap and slide it through your hand to keep it that way, so that you know that this is the back of the strap. And then you're going to take your hook and you're going to slide it on so that the hook is hanging down. A little bit of a tight squeeze on here. Okay, so keep your strap that way and slide your hook almost to the end where you just put the all the other stuff on. Then, keeping your strap in the same direction with the same side facing up, you're going to fold it in on itself and stick it through the slider on the side that has the end cap. So you basically just created a large loop with your strap, and you're going to pull that through. You can pull it almost all the way to the end. Turn over the whole strap. Fold it in on itself again and go through the other side. So you now have the most confusing part of the strap done. And for those of you who already know how to do this like a pro, I'm sure you've already sped up and gotten it done on your own. So now, again, with that same side up, it's going to look like this. Slide your hand down to the end, grab your second hook, slide it on with the hook hanging down again, and then just kind of put it right in the center of all of your holes. If it's a loose hook, just kind of let it slide off and do its thing. But now we're going to go ahead and attach the other end cap. And by the way, you don't have to go in this particular order. You can also put the end caps on after everything else is complete on the strap. I just find it easier to do it this way because I don't like bending the vinyl up trying to get it on there, because I damaged vinyl before trying to do that, and I don't want to have to remake the straps. So All right, slide that on. And make sure if you are using end caps, you're going to see that there's two different sides. One side that usually has a little pattern on it that has the screw holes, and one side that is smooth. You want to make sure that the side that folds in on itself is the side that has the screw holes. Oh, throwing screws all over the place, that's not good. Okay, make sure it's all lined up properly and install. I am done with my screwdriver. Alright, so again, fold it over on itself and install rivets so that they go through both holes. Make sure that the hook sits in the middle of those 4 holes. And there we go. The shoulder strap is now complete, and it should look something like this. And if you have issues, you know, rewind and try again. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And then I'm going to grab the pieces for the flaps. Okay. Now this is going to be the most time-consuming part of the entire pattern, but I love the way it looks. So you're going to have 2 different sets here. You've got your back flap and your front flap. So the front flap is the shorter of the 2, and the back flap is the longer one. So as you can see, they don't match up in size at all. So just kind of lay them out the way that they're supposed to go, and if the connection sides are relatively close in size, then you know you've got the correct 3 pieces. So let's go ahead and start on the short flap. Just going to grab some clips. And then this is going to be a little tricky. You're going to have to do a little twisting and bending, but you want to make sure that you line up the actual edge itself as well as possible. It looks like it's not going to fit, but it will. Not perfectly, because in creating this pattern I couldn't find the perfect way to make it look absolutely perfect. So it's going to be a little off, and you will see that once I get it all put together. Okay, now as you can see, it's bowing in the direction of the smaller piece, which it is supposed to do. That is totally fine. So drop your stitch length down to whatever you use. I like to use a 3mm. And then go ahead and stitch these together at 3/8 of an inch. Alright, now once you trim your threads, you can check. And this is what you want to have on the right side. And as you can see, it's not going to match up very, like, perfect on just the edges, which is fine because we're going to be trimming all of that off anyways. This is what you want. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the second piece, and then I'll go ahead and whip through the second flap. All right, there's the second one. As you can see, that one doesn't line up either, because math is hard and creating patterns isn't always hard either, or isn't always easy either. I can't even talk. Let me just do this other piece. So next you're going to need to throw your gusset in the trash, because I'm good at that. But then after you retrieve it, grab your scissors. You're going to want to snip all 4 of those seams about 3/4 of the way up to your stitches. You don't have to make small spaces, but just don't snip your seams. That's the most important thing. Next, I'm going to use my 1/4 inch roll of double-sided tape. Now, you don't have to use double-sided tape if you don't want to, but that's going to make this part a bit tougher if you don't. So go ahead and grab it if you can. Maybe make sure you have a fresh needle on your machine, or use a Microtex needle, or use a thread and needle lubricant. I actually do use one. It's this one from Wawak. It's just a thread lubricant. It's very inexpensive and it lasts a long time. I've been using this bottle for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And it came completely full, and it's still just over half. And I use this every single sewing project. So totally worth it. You just drip a little bit on your needle or just above the needle on the thread as needed. My machine can handle double-sided tape without using the thread lubricant, but I like to use it sometimes just in case. So you're going to want to place the double-sided tape down just along the stitch line, not on top of it, but right next to it, on both sides of each of the seams. All right, now that we've got both of those taped, just kind of rub your tape down, make sure it sticks. And then you're going to peel off the backing. And now the way that I do this, I think it's easier, but it's entirely up to you how you want to do this. So I'm going to use my leather roller and my hemostats. I'm using the hemostats because I've got long nails. So what I do is I will use them to separate and press down. But I'm going to do every other little section here. And then I'll go back and do the other part of it. And the reason why I do it staggered like that is because it helps with the distribution of the bulk a little bit. And then I'll use the leather roller to roll it all down nice and flat. Just like that. That's what you want. That's why you need the double-sided tape. And then go ahead and repeat that on the remaining 3. All right. So now that we have these pieces done, in the instructions, I show that you can trim to even off the top. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. I like to do it just because it gives me a nice clean edge to work with. And we're about to do foam after this, and I don't want to cut too much foam, so clean edge will help with that. Okay, next you're going to take these over to your cutting area and lay them out on a piece of foam. And then you're going to want to cut about 1 inch longer on each side, just kind of around the entire edge, so that your foam piece is slightly larger than the flap itself. And when I say 1 inch, I mean 1 inch the whole way, not 1 inch in each direction. So if you're cutting a 16-inch piece off of a 15-inch pattern, this is actually, I don't remember how big this is. So this is just about 13.5 inches. So you would cut 14.5 inches widthwise. And this is about 13 inches. So you would cut 14 inches in the length. So I'm gonna go cut my foam, and then I will be right back, and we'll get started on the next step. Okay, now what we're going to do is, here's my pieces of foam. Which one? And as you can see, I just kind of cut a general shape, nothing really exact. Oh, let me roll these down again. But you want the extra foam because you don't know exactly how your fabric is going to react with it. This is precisely why I also did not cut, or I did not include a lining pattern piece, because after you're done with all of this sewing, you could end up with too much or too little of the lining fabric, depending on the fabric you're using and depending on how your foam reacts. So first of all, I'm going to use my spray, and I'm just going to baste it a little bit. Just to kind of hold it in place so it doesn't shift a lot when I'm sewing. And I'll go ahead and do this one really quick. Set that aside. All right. So you're going to use whatever your top stitch length is, and you are going to top stitch down on both sides of both of these seams, as well as baste the exterior piece to the foam. And let me double check my bobbin. Yeah, I should be good to go. You never know. You think you might have enough and then you run out, and then you think you're gonna run out and it lasts forever. right, so the way I do this is I will start at the top of one, go down, up, over, down, up, and then I'll just keep going all the way around. And that seems to be the quickest way, in my opinion, instead of stopping and starting in multiple places. And there's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and do the second one before trimming it all down. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and clean this up. So you can use your scissors or a rotary cutter or an X-Acto, whatever you've got on hand. And just trim around the edges. It doesn't matter if you trim little tiny bits of your fabric off as well. You just basically want to get as close to it as possible so that you can see where you're going to be stitching with the lining. And there we go. So now those pieces are ready for the lining. So we're going to head back over to the cutting table, and again, you're going to use these as your templates and lay them right sides to right sides, right side to right side on your lining. Make sure that your lining piece is cut mirror image of this, otherwise it's not going to work out. So I will be right back once I've got my lining pieces. Okay, so now I've got my lining pieces together, and you want to keep the exterior lining or exterior side right side to the lining right side. And now if you trust your skills, you don't have to baste, but I am going to baste this down onto the lining before I do my 3/8 inch stitch, and my dog is going crazy because it has a tendency to shift. The waterproof canvas is a little bit slick, as is my crosshatch vinyl. So I'm going to baste before I do my regular stitches. I did forget to mention that you only baste along the sides and the bottom and not the top opening. But as you can see, it did shift quite a bit actually. See, I got this gap and I was holding this down a little bit further, but it shifted. That is why I baste. Then I'm going to go ahead and do a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Actually, let me baste this one first so I can get that done and out of the way. All right, so this one's not as bad. It didn't shift as much, but I still have the bubbly. All right, now I'm going to trim down the lining so that it will make it easier to see what I'm doing for the 3/8 inch stitches. Now I'll go ahead and do the 3/8 of an inch with your regular stitch length. Again, leave the top open. And there you go. Now you're going to want to trim your seam allowances down by half and get rid of all that extra crap. If you happen to have too much foam in your seam allowance, you can try and clip it closer to your stitches, the foam by itself, not the rest of the fabric. Or you can spaz out like my dog. But if you do try and clip your foam closer to your stitches, just be careful so that you don't clip into your stitches. Also, one thing I do want to point out, that because this is a turnout type flap, you will not have perfectly pointed corners. If you want to do these flaps with perfectly pointed corners, then all you have to do is cut the fabric out as you normally would, except you will cut the foam and the lining at the same time. Make sure you mirror the lining. And then you'd probably want to like glue everything together first, cut it out, and then from the actual pattern size, instead of doing a 3/8 inch seam allowance, you're going to do a 1/2 inch top stitch, and then you're going to trim off that 3/8 of an inch. That way you're going to have the right amount of width. I'm looking for words here. Width for the flap to fit the way this one does. And then, of course, once you've got that done, you would just edge coat. Now, one thing that you can do for these corners is if you trim sort of at a sharper angle, that will help give you a little bit less bulk when you turn it right side out. But you don't want it to be too close. And that's only on both of the side corners. Okay, so we are done with the internal construction of the flaps. Now it is time to flip it right side out. Hold on one sec. Let me check the instructions to make sure I'm still going at the same pace and in the same order, because just my luck, I'm going to throw everybody off. Okay, so I start by pushing all of the corners in. Trying to do this on camera. I'm using a different angle this time, hoping that it'll be easier for you to see what I'm doing. But I'm so used to having a camera over my shoulder that I forget that you can't see what I'm doing unless I lean forward. So I'm putting in my I can't even remember what the hell, hemostats to help grip and poke out my corners. Gonna open it up a little bit like that. Alright, that's about as good as I'm going to get it without completely destroying the fabric. I did end up using my hemostats to kind of reach into the corners and carefully grab and pull. And if you do something like that, if you're using hemostats or anything that has teeth on it like this does, be very, very careful that you don't pull too hard. If it feels like it's not going to come, let go, go back in and re-grip. If you just keep pulling until it comes out, you're probably going to rip your fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the other flap out off camera. And then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I've got both of my flaps turned out, and as you can see, they are very different in size. This is the front flap, this is the back flap. So next, once you've got your corners pushed out as far as you can get them, I kind of manipulate it a little bit with my fingers. I'll also use my glass running pliers to kind of pinch it into submission a little bit. Throw clips all over the room. And then I'll use my chopstick to kind of push it a little bit more if I can, but I don't want to push it too hard because the last time I ended up poking a hole through. So next, what you're going to do is you're going to want to make sure that you've got your seams, my dogs, pushed up as far as you can. And then you clip them down all the way around. And that helps if you put your hand inside of the flap to push the seam out. And at the same time, use your other fingers on the outside to kind of push down. So you're pushing towards you with your one hand and away from you with the other to pinch it in there really well. If you are using a fabric that can be pressed, then you could go ahead and give it a press. I'm too lazy to turn on my heat press, so I'm just gonna clip it. All right, now it's time to top stitch, and I'm going to double check my bobbin again, and I'm good for both. All right. Okay, so we're going to top stitch down the side, across the bottom, and then up the other side, and leave the top open. We still have to install the snap. All right, so we are now done with the overall construction part of the flaps. Now it's time to turn them over and install our magnets. Okay, so you're going to need a ruler. And we're going to go, see if I can show you this way, 1 inch in from the outside flap on the long side. So we're not putting anything over here, only on here. 1 inch in, and 2 3/8 inches up from the bottom. So find the lowest point, Mark that as your 2 3/8 inch. And then whatever kind of marking tool you want to use, just make a little dot. By the way, make sure you're doing this on the lining side on both flaps. So again, 2 3/8 inches and a dot on the corner. Okay, so it'll look like that. Then if you are using magnets that have washers, just go ahead and drop your washer right over that center dot and mark your spot for your holes. Okay. Now, what you're going to want to do is ever so carefully, and I really need to change out my blade on this because it isn't sharp anymore. Stick your fingers in there to kind of hold the lining up away from the exterior. This is how I've got my fingers in there. So you want your fingers to be spread out away from where your magnet's gonna go. As much as possible. You can move them around until they are away from where you're cutting. So then you go ahead and just poke your holes. If you have a thimble, you could use one of those, or if you have something else that you can fit into the corner that you can cut up against so that you don't have to use your finger, you can do that. Just be really careful though when you do put your hand in there. All right. Now I like to use glue on some of my hardware. So I'm going to go ahead and prep my magnets. I like to use the female ends of the magnets on my flaps, and I'll explain why. It's because they're bigger, thickness-wise, they're weightier, and it helps to keep the flap more weighted in a downward position, whereas if you use the male end, it's lighter and it doesn't really give any extra weight to it. It's a personal preference thing. So what I'm going to do is, this is E6000, which is an industrial super glue. And I just get a little bit of it on, a little bit of it on the end of a toothpick. And then I'll just drop a little gob of it in the center of the magnet on the back side, obviously. Okay. And then install it. And I'm going to let that sit for a moment. Okay. I'm going to let both of those sit. I also have a bunch of these guys pre-cut. I use a little punch tool to make a bunch of these little circles out of Decovil heavy, just to have a little extra something. I'm going to go ahead and prep the ones that I'm going to need for the other half of the magnet too. So they're just slightly larger than the magnet pieces. And so I'm just going to draw the lines that I'm going to need to cut for the prongs. And then taking my little cutting mat and my X-Acto, I'm just going to slice into where I made my marks. And then I'm going to take another bit of glue. Let me set a couple of these aside. And the reason why I use the glue on the Decoville is because it would be really messy to use it on the metal pieces, because it would just squeeze right out everywhere. So just take a little bit and just spread it over. Come on. Just like that. You don't need a ton, just a little bit. Then I'm going to grab my hemostats. And it'll be easier if I squish this down. Just gonna kind of squish this down a little bit. Alright, and then with the glue side down, I lost it. I lost my view. Come on. There we go. Alright, glue side down, and I'll just insert it over the prongs. There we go. And then, using the hemostats again, I'm going to insert the washer on top of the Decoville. And then I'm going to use my pliers to push the prongs down. Not because of my nails or because I can't get my finger in there, but because I can get a much tighter press by using them. Okay, and then just straighten it out again, and that one is good to go. So I'm going to repeat on the other side. Let me get this visible first. Now, you might ask, why don't you install the snap or the magnet beforehand? Because this is the best way that I could see getting the best placement for it. Because it could go any way depending on how well you get that corner pointed out. If you don't get it pointed out very well, and then you install the snap in the same place, chances are it's going to be too short for meeting the other end of the magnet. There we go. Next, all we have to do is baste the opening closed. And there we go. Now both flaps are complete. Okay, so now we're going to do the hidden pocket, which isn't really technically hidden, but you do have to lift the flap to access it. So what you're going to need is the front flap, which is the shorter of the two. You're going to need your main panel front lining, and you're going to need your two front pocket inner lining pieces. So starting with the flap here, let's mark our centers. And then we're going to mark our centers on the front lining piece. And you'll want to mark top and bottom for that. I need to sharpen my scissors. And then you only really need to mark top for one of the pocket pieces, but you can mark both if you really want to. It's not going to hurt anybody. Here, I'll do it just because. Okay, so then you're going to take one of the pocket pieces and your flap. Now make sure that you've got your pocket lining right side up, and you can do your flap either exterior side up or exterior side down. It doesn't matter because we're going to do both sides. So first, starting with the middle, go ahead and add a clip. And then work your way out. And as you can see, the flap is straight, but the pocket lining is not. So just kind of bend and manipulate the lining piece to match the straight edge. Doesn't have to be perfectly clipped because we're about to baste it, but just get it so it doesn't shift. And then go ahead and baste it into place. Alright, so now it should look something like this, where it's a little bowed up at the top. It'll be loose towards the bottom, totally fine. So then you take the other lining piece and match it up, either using the center or the edges. And continue around until you have it all clipped up again. Alright, so then it should look like this. You've got a little bit of a sandwich going on. And then go ahead and stitch this across the top at a seam allowance of 3/8. Okay, now once that's done, if you are using thinner fabrics, you can go ahead and do the snips along the curve like we did on the back side of the flap. But since I'm using thick waterproof canvas and thick vinyl, I'm not going to be able to do that. So instead, I'm going to use double-sided tape. It's the only way I'm going to get it to lay as flat as I need it. Alright, so I'm going to pull and press this so that I get my seam to be nice and tight. Okay, and then I'll flip it over and do the same on the other side. Alright, and then just because I'm using all that tape, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of my lubricant on my thread. Next, you're going to want to top stitch across here on the lining side and then go all the way around and baste the opening closed. I do want to say here that I believe in the instructions I showed clips all the way around. I'm being lazy right now. If you need to clip it, go right ahead. And there you go. You now have the pocket piece ready to go. Now you're going to take that main front panel lining piece, and if you didn't already, mark your centers, and then you are going to lay the pocket piece down on top of the right side of the lining piece with the exterior flap pointed up. Oh, I did not mark my centers on the bottom of this thing. So do that. Mark your centers first. There we go. Alright, get these out of the way. Okay, so you should have something that looks a little bit like this. So, exterior side of the flap facing up, right side of the lining front panel piece facing up, all of your clips around here, and yes, this is going to come, the pocket is going to come down below the top edges of the lining panel for the lining front panel. So don't try and match those top edges up. And then go ahead and baste those together. So now that that's all basted together, you can go ahead and set it aside because half of your lining is now done. Okay, so now we're going to do the rest of the lining, and what you're going to need is the pocket piece from the previous step. You're going to need the main panel back lining piece, the gusset lining piece, the two zipper pocket pieces, your zipper, and your pull. All right, so make sure that you cut your centers in pretty much everything, not your zipper. So we're going to do top and bottom centers in the main back panel, and then top and bottom of at least one of the lining or the pocket pieces. Oh, and I do want to make a note of this in case you look at the instructions and you go, what the hell? After I did the instructions, I decided to shorten the height of the pocket. So if you look at the image, it's going to show you a pocket that's 2 inches taller. So if you decide you want that extra length, that's totally fine. You can go ahead and cut your piece 2 inches taller. If you don't, then you don't. So let me cut the gusset real quick. And then just to save time, I already installed my zipper pull. So I'm going to show you the difference in the pocket pieces. So this is what your pocket piece is going to look like if you decide to add the extra 2 inches back. You're going to line it up literally from top to bottom. So it'll be just slightly smaller than the panel piece. Now, I'm going to need my ruler. And my marking pen. All right, so go 1 inch down from the top, and I've got the center of my ruler lined up with that center mark that I cut. And I just want to straighten up the edge here. Okay, and then you are going to make a 10-inch line. Okay, and then 1/4 of an inch below that one. Oh, I lost my center. There we go. So 1/4 of an inch below that line, or 1 1/4 inches, you're going to do a 9-inch line. And then 1/4 of an inch below that one, or 1.5 inches from the top, you're going to do another 10-inch line. And this is all on the wrong side, by the way. I don't know if I said that. The later it gets, the more my brain tries to shut down. And if you want to, you can go ahead and square off the box. It's not a necessity, but it's definitely something you can do as a guide. And then if you are so inclined, you can draw a line from each end of the shorter line down and up to those corners. It doesn't really matter either way. Okay, and then you are going to place this centered And where'd my little ruler go? 1 inch down from the top and 1 inch up from the bottom. All right. Now I like to use a stitch length of 3 millimeters when doing these pockets. And I think, let me double check my bobbin. Oh, look at that. I would have so lost bobbin chicken on that one. I've only got one more bobbin wound after this, so I'm gonna have to do a few more later. All right, make sure I did not lose my lineup. Pull this over, and I'm gonna start up towards the top. And then just make your way around the entire outer box. All right, go ahead and trim those down. And then you're going to, sorry, I had to pause for a moment because my dogs decided to go into a barking frenzy. And I took the time to change out the blade in my X-Acto. So you're going to slice carefully down the center from end to end. And then when you stop, you're going to want to carefully cut from each corner down to where that center line is. Be very careful not to slice your threads. And make sure it cuts all the way through as well. There we go. And now, some of you might cringe, because this is where I get into using my double tape again. My double-sided tape. And this one's about to end, so I need to get a new roll opened. And I can show you now. So this is the Hyperstick double-sided tape that I use from Wawak. And just like it says on the pack, it is super strong. I love this stuff. This is the only double-sided tape I use anymore. I used to buy some from Amazon that I really liked, but once I tried the Hyperstick, you know, once my budget freed up and I was able to actually afford something better, I tried this and I never went back. I love it. So I use a lot of double-sided tape on here, so I'm not going to walk you through how I do it. You can just watch and cringe. Okay, so now you're going to tuck the pocket in through the opening. And this is where my double-sided tape works out for me the best, because the top never really wants to stay up. As you can see, it keeps folding down. So I'm going to start with the bottom. And then using my leather roller, pull these apart and then open the part with the tape on it and roll it down. And then I'm going to add a little bit more tape here, which is going to give me a nice crease on the right side. So I usually go from the front so I can see where I'm folding. And if you're not using tape, you can absolutely use clips. You just want to make sure you get a nice clean fold. There we go. Nice pocket opening. And in hindsight, I could have used purple string or purple thread on the outside of the flap. Oh well. Alright, so now I've got my zipper, and I have my zipper jig. I do have a whole video on this, so you can look that up if you are interested in knowing what it is or where it came from. And then get ready to cringe again. More double-sided tape. Told ya, I use a lot. And my machine can totally handle it. I just want to make sure I keep it out of the visible area of the pocket. Then you just line it up. By the way, my zipper is a lot longer than my pocket because personal preference. I like to have the extra. Okay, and then once you've got everything lined up, go ahead and top stitch about 1/8 of an inch around your opening. Make sure you keep your zipper out of the way. And if you have a zipper foot, you may want to use it. I'm going to pull my threads to the back because I'm going to be tying them all off so that I don't have back stitch in the front. Then I'm gonna light those suckers on fire and press them down with my leather roller. That way I get a nice smooth backing so that when someone sticks their hand in, they're not going to scratch up against it at all. Okay. Make sure your zipper works. And then grab the other side and start clipping it down right side to right side on the other part of the pocket. Oh, I found a new clip that doesn't want to work. Alright, and now I'm going to use a little trick I learned from Lauren Mormino a couple of years ago, because she does it to her pockets. You take both layers of the pocket and you fold them up. And just pop some clips in there to hold them in place. And I'm only folding them up about 1/2 inch or so. So nothing too crazy. Just fold them up and away from the front of the pocket. Just like that. Then we're going to turn the pocket over and you're going to fold back the lining piece and you're going to ignore the bottom. You're going to stitch up, flip the top of the lining down, stitch across, flip it out of the way again, and then stitch back up the other side, again, leaving the bottom part alone. Alright, and then just get rid of the rest of those clips. And if you have anything sticking out, you can trim it down. It's all far enough away from the seam allowance that it shouldn't be an issue. Unless you added those extra 2 inches to the height of your pocket, in which case you will absolutely want to trim them away so that your seam allowance doesn't become bulky at the top. And there we go. There is the almost completed pocket. We still have a peekaboo hole at the bottom, which we're going to worry about at the very end of the bag, so don't worry about it now. Okay, so now go ahead and grab your gusset lining, and if you did not already mark your centers, do that now. Now you can really start with either side, but I'm going to start with the front pocket just because it's a little bit easier. Alright, so line up the bottom marks on one side of the gusset and on the bottom of the pocket. Make sure that you've got the right side of your gusset facing down towards the side of the pocket that has the lining side facing up. So if you do it like this, you've got it backwards. Make sure the exterior side is up. And then go ahead and that's that one that, let me just toss it out. Alright, so start at the bottom, lining up your clipped marks. And then turn and then do the side. Now I realize that these are wonky looking, but it works sometimes. No, I'm kidding. It does work. It's fine. So go ahead and line up that corner with the corner. And just clip them together and start working your way down. And then I'm going to go back to the bottom and start working my way towards the side. Now, when you've got your corner here, let me try some different scissors. You're going to go ahead and make a few clips. Do not go past about 1/4 of an inch, because remember, you've got that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and you do not want to cut into that. So once you've got those cut, you'll be able to make it around that corner a lot easier. Now, I did find with the other bag that I did the other day, the first time I attempted to do the tutorial, and this is part of what I was talking about before, how I jacked up the gusset. For some reason, that waterproof canvas became very stretchy, and I ended up stretching way beyond the top edges of the front and back lining pieces. So that just kind of sent a spiral of everything getting wonky. So this waterproof canvas seems to be a lot more solid than the other one. The other one was a coral kind of color. Okay, and then starting on one end, you're going to stitch it together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use my hemostats to hold the end of it because it comes apart. Okay, and then when you get about an inch or so, a little bit longer, in on your stitching, you're going to want to taper in towards 1/2 inch. And then continue sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around until you get about the same amount of distance from the top of the other side. Remember to taper out again to 3/8 of an inch. I suck at going around curves, so my curls are weird and bunchy because I didn't get it tightened enough. Okay. Then you're going to grab the lining piece from the zipper lining panel. I can totally speak. Alright, so what you're going to do is on the wrong side, you're going to find your center mark, grab a ruler, and just kind of line up the center of your ruler if you've got one long enough. And I believe in the instructions I say 4 inches, but because this is thicker, I'm going to go with 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm just going to make a little line where that 5 is. And then on the other side as well. Then I'm going to clip this lining side onto the opposite side of the gusset And again, right sides together. Except the only difference is that when I get up to where my mark is, the marks that we just made right here, I'm going to transfer that to the wrong side of the gusset because I'm going to be sewing from the gusset side. So I want to make sure that I've got my marks on that side. I suppose you could have just marked the 4 or 5 inches directly on the gusset, but And then we'll continue clipping. And again, line up the top pieces as best you can. Don't forget to trim little or clip into your gusset so that it will go around the curve. All right, flip this over and do the exact same thing with one major change. Those marks that we transferred over to the gusset, you're going to stitch down the side with your taper, and then once you get to that first line, stop and end your stitches. Lift your needle, move over to the other side where the mark is, begin stitching again, and then go up and finish the side. You want to make sure that you leave that gap open in the bottom because that's going to be our turning hole. All right, and then you can go ahead and trim down the seam allowance. Once you get to where your stitches stopped or started at the bottom, you're going to stop cutting. Skip that section and then start cutting on the other side. All right, once all that's done, go ahead, remove your clips, and your lining section is all done. So we'll go ahead and set that aside, and then we're going to get started on the exterior. Okay, we're getting closer to the end here. Working on the exterior, you are going to need the back flap, the main panel back, the main panel front, the gusset exterior, the opposite sides of your magnets. Mine are male, so whatever side you didn't use. The scrap pieces of stabilizer if you want to use them, and duct tape if you want to use that as well. So you're also, what I did not put in the pattern, but you're still going to need it, is the front main panel piece. All you're going to need it for is to mark your holes. So just lay the pattern piece right over the front exterior. And if you haven't already, punch holes in the little spots where it says magnet. And then you can just mark right through the holes where your magnets are going to go. Then, again, if you're using washers, go ahead and lay your washers and mark where it's gonna be cut. I'll be able to show you a lot easier now how I install my magnets. So grab your cutting mat and then puncture all the way through all of the layers, only where you're putting the prongs. Okay, and then I'm going to grab another toothpick and my glue and my magnets. And since I don't have to fight to get my hand in here, I'm going to just go ahead and put the glue on everything that I use it on. So dab on the back of each magnet. Not too much because I don't want it to spill out. And then a little bit on each piece of stabilizer. I'll go ahead and put this away. And drop shit all over. Alright. And then go ahead and install your magnets. Alright, so flipping over. Whoops. So I will put the washers glue side down, or rather the stabilizer washers glue side down. And then the regular washers. And then I unfortunately don't have a way to really... Actually, you know what? I might be able to reach. Let me see if I can't zoom in. Hey, that works a little. I need a new lens though so I can zoom in closer. So the way that I do this is I take the side of my pliers, and I'm going to use my awl so I don't put my fingers in the way. So hold this still. You can't even see. Pay attention. I'm looking at my screen. Okay. So, holding it still, I put the side of my pliers flush against the prong on the side, and then I push down, straight down, and then bend forward. And that'll get it in there nice and tight. And then I do the same thing on the other side. And then just hammer it in a little bit. So you can see how, God, this camera is backwards to me because it's in front of me. See how tightly that is put in there? So I'll go ahead and do the other one again. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Hold still. Just like that. So those are both in there nice and tight and they're not going anywhere. Ta-da. Then, still gonna do the duct tape. Just like that. protection. Did I not zoom out enough? I didn't. There we go. All right. That is good to go. Now, go ahead and find your centers and give them a little mark of some kind. Okay. Then, if you do a metal bag tag or any kind of bag tag, you could do that now if you're putting it on the front. Okay, so we'll set this one aside. And then we got a marker centers in the flap at just the top of it, and then the top and bottom of the exterior, the back exterior piece. And while we're at it, since I'm probably going to forget, we'll go ahead and cut the, mark the centers of the gusset. Okay. So now I'm going to take the exterior back piece and the flap and lay them exterior to exterior along the top edge, line up at the centers, and then clip them together just like we did with the front flap. Go ahead and baste together at 1/8 of an inch. Alright, so now we've got that piece together. You're going to grab the gusset and we're going to match it up just like we did with the lining. Right sides together, clip from the center bottom, and then go from the sides. Don't forget to clip your corners too. Alright, and then go ahead and stitch around the whole gusset at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you keep your flap out of the way. Whew. This vinyl is trying me. It keeps slipping out of position. So look at that. I had it perfectly lined up, and on both sides it decided to slip out. I'm pausing here just to make a note that staples would have been really ideal in this situation, but my brain wasn't functioning properly at this point in time, so I didn't use them. Oh well. So now we're going to take the front exterior panel and line it up and do the same. Just for good measure, and because everything was slipping all over the place, I'm going to go ahead and run a second line of stitching around my whole bag. So this is not in the pattern, this is optional. I'm also gonna have to re-glue my my foam because it's coming up. So I'm gonna pause and then come back when I'm done doing that. All right, and then go ahead and trim down your seam allowance by half. Now once you are all done, you're going to turn your exterior right side out and double check your stitching to make sure that you didn't miss any spots. I start by pushing a corner in and then pop it out. Okay. Looks good to me. Now you can even check your first lock. That's kind of how we're gonna look in the end. We're getting close. Okay, so now go ahead and grab your lining, and we're going to tuck the exterior into the lining. So the zipper pocket goes towards the back. So I'm going to lay it with the zipper pocket down on the bottom. And then I'm going to take the exterior and slide it in, making sure that the flap is tucked into the back between the exterior and the lining. And then for the front, it doesn't matter if you tuck the front flap into the front pocket or into the space between the pocket and the exterior, which is what I'm doing. All that matters is that flap is out of the way. This is definitely some thick vinyl, and the foam and the waterproof canvas aren't helping. Alright, so next what you're going to do is you're going to line up all of the top edges. You can start at the side seams or at the center marks, however you want to start. And if your fabric is thin enough, you can go ahead and use clips. But because mine is so super thick, I am using my stapler. Okay, so I didn't show the entire process because I needed to have this right in front of my face. But as you can see, I've got stitches, or not stitches, staples running all the way around to hold everything together. Now, this could get a little tricky, but you're going to go ahead and do a 3/8 of an inch stitch across the entire top, but you're going to have to be mindful of your flap that's tucked in here because the front flap is so close. So one thing that I do is I will reach in through the bottom, make sure you grab the right one, and I will pull down. See, you grip here and pull down to make sure that that flap is completely out of the way. I'm also going to use my guides because this bag is wanting to just rip right away from the needle. I should have kept my guides down. Here we go. Now make sure that you follow the curve. Well, there's not really a curve, but make sure you follow the edge so that you keep your seam allowance consistent when you are going around the sides. Make sure you inspect your stitches to make sure that you caught everything. Feel around to make sure that you didn't catch anything you shouldn't be catching. And now I'm going to painstakingly pull out all of my staples because I am not trimming my seam allowance. All right. I am, however, going to trim this part of the seam allowance on the gusset just because I don't want it getting in the way of the grommet. If you want to trim the rest of your seam allowance down, go for it. Alright, so once you are done with that, we're going to go ahead and turn the bag right side out. So I will go in and squish the exterior. And then I'll toss the bag over and over, slowly pulling the exterior out. So, I don't know how I can show you this better. Pull a little bit, turn, pull, turn, pull, turn, and on and on. There we go. So now, just make sure you get all of your corners popped out. I want to make sure that those tops of the gusset get popped out as well. And I'm going to use my chopstick to do that. All right. Now, I'm going to tuck the lining in where it belongs. Make sure you tuck that pocket in the front. Now, if you did your stitching on the other side properly, you should have this little gap here in between the outside of the bag and the flap for the front pocket. See, that's visible on both sides, that little like 3/4 inch gap. And I missed a little bit of a corner here, so I'm gonna poke it out. Also going to take my glass running pliers and just kind of squish down those bulky corners because I did not trim my seam allowance all the way around. So on some of the seams it's going to be a little more bulky. So once again, I jacked up my own gusset. All right, let me show you. Because I was unable to maneuver the bag underneath my needle properly. So, as you can see, the curve goes like this and then slants, goes across, and then diagonally down. Whereas this one there's the curve, goes diagonal up, flat across, diagonal down. This is closer to what it's supposed to look like. It's not perfect because it's really, really puffy and I can't get all that out of there. But the other side is janky, so oh well. I'm not going to mess with it anymore, but I at least want to point that out just so you know that it is supposed to be pointy, not curvy. All right, now right now I want to top stitch, but let me keep going with what the instructions say. Yes, we're going to top stitch. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't confuse anyone by going in a different order, because that's what I do. I don't usually go in the same order every time. And now I'm going to, yep, that's the end of a bobbin again. Look at that. Twice. Technically one bobbin chicken. All right, so let me get this in here. Oops. Get all the rest of this stuff out of my way. Alright, so roll your edges so that they are as even as you can make them. And then just add clips all the way around except for where the back flap is, because obviously you can't clip that. And again, in spots where it's really thick, just go ahead and squish it down as best you can. Just gonna tuck this flap back inside so it's out of my way, because it's just kind of bugging me right now. Make sure that you don't clip any part of that pocket into the front of the bag if you've got your flap tucked in. Alright, so now you can go ahead and top stitch 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you can backstitch if you want to, but I will also show you how to hide your stitch line, or rather stitch ends. So first I gotta get this nice and tight here. I suppose I could sew it upside down, or from the inside, it'd be easier. I wish my cylinder arm was functional right now, but it's not. So make sure you've got your thread ends long, nice and extra long, so they can be pulled in. And then I'm going to stitch like this. And I'm going to lubricate my thread. Remember to keep that pocket out of your way when you stitch down the front. Make sure you stop your stitches at least at exactly one stitch before your first stitch. Pull your threads along and cut them. So now you've got 4 long threads. They don't need to be this long. Trim them a little bit. Okay, then next you're going to need to get a hold of a sewing needle, a hand sewing needle, and you're going to take, I'll start with the exterior, both of the exterior threads, and thread them through the needle. Alright, so first I'm going to pull the front flap out of here so it's out of the way. Then I'm going to pull the lining up. In fact, you can pull it like right out of the bag so that you can easily see the inside and have it freed up. So with those threads attached to your needle, you're going to stick them through either of the two holes. It doesn't matter, but you want both threads going through one of the holes that you previously stitched where one of the threads is sticking out. And I don't have a very good grip on this needle. Be careful when you're trying to grab it. Try not to stab yourself. There we go. Just pull those through, and now they're gone. Pull the needle out, leave the threads in there, and then you're going to do the exact same with the threads on the lining side, and then pull them through. Alright, same thing, but through one of the lining side holes. Again, be careful when you grab the needle. Alright, and then go ahead and put your needle away. And then I'll pull this part out so it's easier for you to see. So there should be a little junction where all four of your threads popped out. And you're just going to separate them into 2 and 2 and tie a few knots. You want to make sure that the knots are tight, but not so tight that it pulls too tightly on the outside and then you've got a weird pucker. So I do about 3 or 4 knots. And then I'll trim with about 1 inch left on there. I don't know if you can see that. Let me. So you see there's about 1 inch left for all 4 of those threads. And then I'm just going to grab some fray check and just cover that knot really good. Then you can just tuck everything back in, and that fray check will dry and lock your stitches. Now you're going to open up the zipper pocket, reach inside, and pull the bottom of the lining out through the bottom of the pocket. So just kind of tuck your pocket lining back out of the way. and get as much of the bottom of the bag lining out of the pocket as you can. Then you're just gonna line it up and add clips like you did before. Alright, and once you've got that all clipped up like so, you're going to want to try and straighten it out as much as you can so that you can access it. And then you're going to want to stitch where you stopped and started again. You're going to want to stitch that line continuously. And keep in mind that this, if you did taper out, is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little bit before where I stopped and then end a little bit after where I started again. Okay, trim your threads. Then if you want just to keep it all cohesive, you could trim down the part that you just stitched so that it lines up with the rest of it. Now shove that back down into the bottom of the bag. We are so close to the end, I promise. Now, if you forgot to do anything like add a bag tag or anything, now would be your chance to fix it or install it. And then if you're done, pull the zipper pocket all the way out. And now here's where that, I'm going to call this the Lauren fold, comes in handy. Go to one side, pull it apart. It's going to automatically fold right there at the crease. Show you again, just like that. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take the pocket, fold it so that your crease matches those seams. And then go ahead and put in some clips. Just to hold those ones in place. And then it'll make it a little bit easier to line up the rest of the bottom of the bag. Or the rest of the bottom of the pocket, rather. And then I just go back and forth from side to side, adding clips. Just like that. And it's going to give you a nice clean edge. And then I'm going to use a 2mm stitch, and I'm going to try and sew as close to the edge as I can without going over, making sure to catch both sides of the pocket. Just want to make sure I caught everything, and I did. So now I'm going to run my lighter along the edges to make sure I got all of those straight threads. And then you can tuck that pocket in to where it belongs. I am just not used to working with this stiff waterproof canvas anymore. I've been using PU waterproof canvas, and it's so much thinner. The only problem is it doesn't come in a lot of colors. Make sure that your bag bottom and the lining is all the way down where it needs to be. And you want to make sure that the sides are nice and smoothed down so that the lining is even with the exterior up at the top here. Now, it is time for these. These grommets are push-in grommets. And I believe I'm just going to have to use a mallet to install them. I've never used them before, but we'll see how it works. So what you're going to do is you're going to take lay this flat here. You're going to take your ruler and you're going to line it up with the widest part of the gusset, and it's 3 inches, so you're gonna get in there. You're just gonna make a little mark where the center is from the top. Do that on both sides. Then you're going to take one of your grommets, and you want to make sure that you're not using anything smaller than like a 1/2 inch grommet. And that would be 1/2 inch inner diameter. You're going to, how to get you to see this here. You're going to lay the grommet so that it's just below the top stitching. And circle it. On the inside, you want to circle the inner diameter of the grommet. And you're going to do the same on the other side, making sure that the grommet comes up to right below the top stitching. Just like that. And then you're going to have to figure out how you're going to get holes in there. I am going to use a cutting set that I bought on Amazon that's got these cutters in different sizes. And this is going to be just about the size that I need. But I'm going to have to cut a little extra around. Just a little. So how I do this is I take the bag and lay just the top of it right onto my cutting mat. You can't really see that too well, sorry. Then lay the cutter on top. Oh my god, I can't even reach my mallet. Oh, so far away. Okay. So remember to make sure that your lining is flat. Then you want to line up your hole. If you're using a cutter, line up your cutter. If you're not, then probably scissors. Just be very careful. Alright, so that cut all the way through. Now, if you are following the instructions, you have to make sure that you do this right. Okay, you're gonna cut the hole, and this is absolutely the most important part. Once you cut the hole, you gotta stick your fingers through and go, woohoo! So I'm gonna see if this will fit now. Oh, it does fit. That's like perfect. Hey, hey. But I don't know which side is the front and which is the back. That's the only thing I can't figure out. I'm gonna guess this is the front since it's a little more rounded. Right? Maybe it's not. Oh well. So I'm going to put this on here. Oh no. I think it goes the other way. Put that on there like that, and then I'm going to beat the shit out of it. And see if that works. Hey, it did work. I'm gonna have to get more like that. It's the easiest freaking grommet I've ever installed. Look at that. Look how nice that is. I like that. Alright, so you can go ahead and lock up your magnets, and depending on the fabric you're using, you may need to work it a little bit so that it stays where it's supposed to stay for the locks to work. The back flap should be okay, but the front flap is going to need to be trained a little bit. So just grab a hold of, I hope I put these up high enough. Yay! I was worried for a second there that it was a little bit too low. And there you have it. You've got your grommets done for the strap connector, or for the hooks. And I did use specific types of hooks. Uh-oh. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna have to hammer that back in. And if that doesn't work, I'm gonna have to swap it out. But, well, maybe I'll add some glue, see if that'll work. These hooks that open like that are ideal for bags like this. I'll mess with it some more, and if it comes off again, then I'll use some glue, and then if it still doesn't work, I'll swap it out for a bigger grommet. Not a big deal. But There we go. You now have your very own Bat Company messenger bag. So I hope you enjoyed my antics. I hope it was easy to follow along. Feel free to join the Hollow Bag Creations, the patterns group, to show off all of your creations with any of the Hollow Bag patterns that you purchase. I'm also in the So Whatever group, so I can see stuff in there, as well as several other groups. You could also tag me on Instagram or TikTok. I think that's pretty much it. But I would love to see your version of it. So definitely share. And I will leave some info in the description box for where I got these hooks. I don't think I'm gonna share the shop where I got these grommets, since this one feels loose again, so we're not gonna promote that. But definitely enjoy it, and thanks for watching.